So I want to talk today about my favourite topic, and that is learning another language. Well, you probably detect a bit of sarcasm right there, and that's my biggest problem, and maybe my biggest mistake is that I need to improve my attitude when it comes to learning Spanish. It's something that I've been grappling with ever since we left the place that we were previously residing, and I've come to realise that it's a far bigger challenge than what I ever thought would be ahead of us. So I thought I'd just share my journey, and I'd also like to share some observations I've seen of others who have also made the journey successfully, because you can learn a lot from the way others have gone about doing things, and I'm certainly all ears and eyes when it comes to the best way to learning another language. And it really does vary incredibly. I know people who have achieved absolute fluency just by using Duolingo or another online app just on their phone. Somehow they just seem to be able to pick it up just like that, and good on them. Other people watch videos, YouTube. That seems to also work for them. Others just simply immerse themselves and just talk to people enough, and eventually it seems to just become a thing that they can do. Some even learn by just listening to music. But the one theme that I've kept on hearing about as I've researched the best ways to learn a language is the concept of comprehensible input. I'm not an expert in the matter, so I'll leave it to you to do some searching in regards to that topic, but it's essentially the idea that you learn a language best when you have some understanding of what people are saying. So generally it will be something like someone's showing you how to do something, and because of the circumstances you will understand better what some of the words might be. So if someone opens a door and they say the word door in that given language, well, hopefully you might work it out. It's kind of a little bit like miming, I guess, but that's just one method of how comprehensible input works. And apparently the research indicates that that's the most effective way to learn things. So it sounds right to me. So I'd like to just talk about some factors that I've noticed that are common amongst people who tend to pick up the language well, and also present amongst those that maybe struggle. The first factor that comes to mind are the bilingual smarty pants, the people that can already speak 2 or more languages. It's my observation that they just seem to be able to pick up subsequent languages quicker than those that maybe only know one language. And from what I've read, that seems to be supported by the research. For some reason, knowing 2 or more languages seems to give you a leg up when it comes to learning your 4th or 5th or 10th or whatever. Good on them for getting the second language under their belt. I just marvel at these people who can speak several languages. I don't know how they can fit all that in their head. It's an incredible feat, so congratulations to you guys out there. I think that you are a marvel of nature. Another factor that I think is something that people perhaps don't think a lot about is the company that they keep. And what I mean by that is that when we're in a relationship with others, whether it's a couple or a family, generally and often there is 1 or 2 people in that party that are particularly good or proficient at picking up a language. So what you see not infrequently is that there'll be one person of the party who will tend to be the spokesperson. It'll either be the husband or the wife or the child. And what can happen is that over time, that person just becomes the default person that speaks for the family or the couple. And in doing so, what happens is that one person becomes better and better at speaking the language, whilst the person that's sitting on the sidelines doesn't get a chance to practice what they're needing to. And so you see some real imbalances in the group dynamics in terms of who's really progressing and who's not. And I think that's something that we don't really think enough about. And so I'd encourage people out there, if you're moving as a couple or a family, just be mindful of that, because it's such an easy trap to fall into. I know we've fallen into it, and there's different people in our family that seem to be a lot better than others, and those people are the ones that tend to be recruited when something needs to be explained or whatever it is. And it's easy to do, but it really is a learning opportunity that's being missed for those that need to talk up. You need to order your own food, speak to the shop assistant and get what you want. Whatever it is, as hard as it is and as tempting as it is to rely on the person next to you, it really is really a lot better off if everyone gets an equal share of the microphone. You know the kids at school who, when the teacher asked a question, there was always someone in class who would butt into whoever was trying to give an answer and would talk over the top and deliver their brilliant, on-point answer to the question that the teacher had raised. Well, I think all of those smarty pants somehow became expats and moved to all the countries that we've come to, and now they're sitting in cafes and expat meetings and whatever else, just waiting for someone else who isn't as good at the language to try and say something, only to speak over them. And we see this quite often. You'll see someone that will interfere with someone else who's trying to get a point across and will deliver the precise thing that's needed. And what you also see at times is that that same type of individual will actively and openly correct the other people in the party who may not be as proficient in the language. And it's quite funny to watch, but it actually does have, I guess, a kind of serious side, because people are trying to learn a language and the last thing they need is to be embarrassed in the public forum and put straight. It can often be embarrassing for people and it can really put a dent in their confidence. So that is definitely a factor that isn't uncommon. And the thing that I would say to anyone that happens to be a language monitor is just give people a chance, or if you're going to correct people, just do it gently and discreetly. You don't need to interrupt people or show them how superior you are in your language. You just need to give them a go, and everyone finds their own way. The person speaking doesn't need to make a perfect go of it when they're explaining what they want or trying to put their point across. Just to be able to get a point across and have it be understood, when you're learning a language, that's good enough. So on the odd occasion where I happen to know that someone said something maybe grammatically incorrectly in the Spanish language, I don't tend to lean over and say to them, well, you should have said it like this or you should have said it like that. Not only do I think it's kind of bordering on being impolite, it can really dent people's confidence. And for me, the bottom line is, did they get their point across? If they did, then they achieved something. In time, their fluency and their accuracy will get better. They don't need someone like me to come along, because I've got my own problems. I don't have to try and solve theirs. But, you know, if I think it's appropriate, I might speak up, but it's got to be done, you know, tactfully, because the last thing you want to be is sitting around a table and having someone very openly and vocally expressing to you and the group and everyone in the restaurant how you've said something so incorrectly. It doesn't really go well, I don't think, and it's something that is probably more prevalent than we'd perhaps like. And consistency is obviously another big one. You've got to learn, really, I think, every day. And if you're not a consistent, disciplined type of person, obviously it's going to dent your ability to learn a language. And simply because you're living in a country that speaks that language, it doesn't mean that you're going to be necessarily confronted with enough opportunities in any given day. So you can find yourself going for days without any real meaningful interaction when it comes to the language. So you really need to have something to supplement your learning. And although it's romantic and nice to think that you're just going to move to a country and you're just going to have so much interaction and it's just going to come, well, unless you're having really constant interaction, it's going to be a challenge. Another thing that we often don't perhaps think about enough is our ability to actually hear. As we get a bit older, our hearing invariably deteriorates. And you don't notice it if you're just speaking your own language. Day-to-day things, it's generally not a problem for people. And for us older folk, we don't generally even pick up that our hearing has deteriorated. But when you're learning another language, you quickly learn that there's subtle nuances in the language that when people are explaining them to you, sometimes I can't even hear the difference between what they're saying and what I'm saying. And I've come to realise that there's just perhaps a bit of an edge to my hearing that isn't there anymore. And that's something that, it's not a big problem for me because my hearing's still okay, but I think it could easily be a problem if you had a bit more of a hearing issue. There's really some nuances in the language that you just wouldn't be picking up. So anyone that's got a bit of a hearing issue, I just think it's something to be mindful of. And there's other ways to work around that if you're having issues, perhaps picking up those subtle nuances. Well, if you read about it or find other learning methods to bridge that gap, I think it's really important. But if you're not hearing well, I think it's just like any other learning situation. You could perhaps convince yourself that you're just not capable of it, and that would be a real disaster in itself. So I'd really encourage anyone, particularly older people, to just think about your ability to hear and maybe some of the things that you're missing out on, and just work around it. There are workarounds. It's not a deal breaker. It's not the end of the world if your hearing's going a bit. You just got to find other ways to get that knowledge into your head. The degree to which you are self-conscious. It's a big thing to be in another country and trying to speak to people in the language that you're not familiar with. And it can be so confronting. You walk into a shop and there's people around you and you say something and they have no idea what you said. And it can be really daunting. So I think that we need to be honest with ourselves about the degree to which we are inclined to be self-conscious to the extent that we inhibit our opportunities to learn. And I think that marries into the earlier point I made about the competitive language monitor. If you've got someone who is self-conscious and then on top of that they've got a competitive language monitor in their lives, well, it gets even more challenging. So I think that we just need to be honest with ourselves, and if we are the type of people that are just too shy or self-conscious to walk into a public forum and just make the mistakes that we need to make, well, we need to go easy on ourselves for a start and maybe supplement the way that we're learning, because we've got to get it in our head somehow. And those exchanges aren't always pleasant. Paraguayans are really, generally, really friendly people. And for the very most part, when you walk in and say something that they've got no idea what you're talking about, they'll generally be very gentle and kind with you. And in most cases, will try and help you through. Occasionally, you might come across someone who's a bit painful, difficult, or just unwilling to help you through. And that too can add to the difficulties for those people who are a bit self-conscious and can pick up on that. There's no real solution to that. You just need to toughen up and just get through it. Even the difficult situations where sometimes it hasn't been entirely pleasant, they too can be really motivational, I think, for you to really learn that word that you'll never forget. And there's been the odd situation that I've been in that people have been, I guess, not 100% kind, and I think that's helped me because I've never forgotten those words that I said badly or incorrectly. So everything comes with a lesson, so don't be too sensitive if you can help it. But if you are one of those kind of people that really struggle with self-consciousness, particularly in a situation where you don't know the language, well, I think we just got to be honest and maybe work our way through it and build our training needs around that reality. If we are weak in one area, we've got to find another area to try and find the way that we're going to get through it. It's been a real challenge for me. I will openly admit that I am not a linguistic scholar by any stretch. Some people tell me that I've got a speech impediment. That just happens to be the language that I was born into. You know, it can be a real challenge just to get your tongue around some of the basics, rolling your R's and just making different sounds. For me, it's just such a challenge. But not only that, I think that some people are just more inclined to take on a second language than others. And I have my days. I do find some days I'm better than others, to be honest, and the circumstances I'm in, maybe the mood I'm in. So there's so many variables, the people you're surrounded by, the company you're keeping. All of those things I find on one given day to the next can really contribute to the degree to which I feel like I'm starting to make real progress with the language. But I don't make a secret of it that with over 2 years in, I'm still just finding my way. But I'm kind of not too concerned because, for one thing, it can take years to really acquire this language. But the other thing is that when I think of a child, the way a baby learns, well, a baby's laying there and every day it's got its mummy to come and talk to it and to repeat the words and to be really encouraging. And when that baby comes out with just a word or two, well, you'd reckon that they'd won Tats Lotto. So I think about an adult's journey in terms of learning a language, and well, we don't have a mummy around us, and if we come out with a word or two that's correct, well, hardly anyone really celebrates about that. So the truth is that even though you may be 58 years old, you really are starting like a baby. And there's not many areas of learning that I can think of that you're confronted by a 3-year-old who can make a real fool out of you. I can walk into a karate club or a macrame session or whatever else, and if there's a 3-year-old in there that's half competent, well, in a lot of cases, I think I might hold my own against that 3-year-old in most things. But when it comes to language, I've run into 3 or 4-year-olds who I just feel embarrassed to be around because they're just sprouting off the language, and here you are. But, you know, that's one thing you have to do, is just be kind to yourself and realise that a year or two into a language, well, some people are completely fluent by that stage. They're the gifted ones perhaps, or the really committed ones. But for the rest of us, it's going to take time. And I think to learn any language, it's probably going to take years for most people, or at least a lot of people. So at whatever stage you are at, just be kind to yourself. Don't be too beaten up by someone that's just been here for a few months and goes out of their way to show you how brilliant they are. Everyone's on a different path, a different part of their journey. But one of the things I have read about in the research is that when learning a language, some people learn it progressively, and some people tend to not seem to make much progress, but all of a sudden they seem to just come out with it. And apparently that's similar to the way children will sometimes come out with a language. Some kids just progressively are good at it, and others are just seem to be really slow at it, but all of a sudden they're just off and away. Don't be too hard on yourself if you don't seem to be making the progress that you think you could or should. Well, I've tried everything from apps to YouTube, listening to music, movies, whatever I could get for free, I was into it. There's so many amazing resources online. There's so much that you can dig into. But I've realised for me personally, I need, well, a few things. Firstly, I recognise that I learn best when I have a consistent, structured approach. And at least in my situation, when I've been jumping around on YouTube and wherever else, although it's been really helpful, I'll jump from this person to that music, to that movie. And because it's all over the place, I haven't been making the progress that I would have liked to have been making. So I recognise that one of the things that I really need is some sort of structure in my learning journey. And the other thing that I recognise that I really need is that I need a tutor that I can hear and listen to and be engaged with. Other people I know have got other forums that they listen to, other tutors or people that teach online. And at least in one case, I know of someone that really speaks highly of a particular teacher, and they're really good. They get really good results. But for me, when I listen to this teacher, they actually have a similar accent to me. And one thing is, I don't think much of it, and two, it puts me to sleep. You do need to find someone that you gel with in terms of the way they speak. For me, I like to listen to someone that's a little bit different, maybe a bit better at the English language than me, and someone that I can really relate to and that I can understand everything that they're saying. So I think that in terms of the teacher and student, it's really like anything. You've got to find the one that fits you best. And the other thing that I think I really need is to mix up the mediums. You can listen to a video, but for me, after a few minutes, my attention span just goes. And it's just that single source of incoming information that I find really tiring. Just sitting there watching a video, seeing someone talk, even if they're breaking it down and explaining it, my attention span isn't really that great anymore. I don't know if it ever has been, but I just don't like that singular method of learning. I need to watch a video for a while, then hopefully have something to read, and then maybe having something else to look at. I need to mix up the ways that I learn the things so that it eventually sticks in my head. So I've come across something that is really working well for me. It's a platform where you have all that. You have the video content along with summaries of the information that's covered in the video. That's in a written format. You have exercises, you have live sessions, you have the ability to reach out to the tutor and ask questions. And there's a active sort of forum on there. So once you get tired of one thing, you can switch to the next so that you can mix up your mediums. So when I get sick of listening and watching, I can read something. When I'm sick of doing exercises, I can just read the summary of the lessons. It even has a phone app. There's always a device or something not too far from me that I can pick up and at least do a bit of learning. And I think that it's really important that the way that you learn, the method of the incoming information is so important. For me, earlier in the day, I like to watch videos, and then later in the day, I might like to read the language, whether it be in an exercise that I'm doing or just reading the format of the class summary. Different things for different people, but I think in the process of learning a language, the really important thing is to be real about the best way that you learn. This learning process has really brought me down to earth if I wasn't there already, and really made me think about the way that I learn and the way that I don't learn. It's a kind of humbling experience, to be honest. You live your whole life, or at least the part that you can mostly remember, being able to say what you want to say, and then to be brought back to base one and not being able to say even the most basic things. Well, it's a culture shock, but it also is an ego shock too. And we just need to be real about that and get over ourselves and get on with it, because Paraguay is a place where there's a lot of great things about it, but I can say whether this is good or not, the English language is not all that widely spoken here. So you are not going to get away with not being able to speak the language. Of course you can move here and not being able to speak Spanish. You can sort of muddle your way through. But as you settle here and as you really get on and try to do things of substance and purchase big ticket items and just do everything you have to do in order to study, you can't get away with not knowing the language. Although there are people who have been in this country and any other country for years and haven't really picked the language up. And all I can say is that, well, that would be really hard. It would be quite isolating. And it would also be, I think, insecure, because you're really relying on someone else, whether it's the person who's interpreting for you or, you know, whatever it is. Hello, pup. Hello, man. Oh. Hey, buddy. So it does put you in a relatively precarious... Wow. There we are. Doggy Boulevard. It does put you in a potentially precarious position. You don't want to be long-term in a country and not being able to speak the language. It's not viable. It's really important that we get our head around this. We also have to acknowledge that there's some of us that, well, it's a long road, and that's okay, because, you know, we can't be good at everything. You might be a professor at something, but when it comes to a language, you just might struggle. And there might be other people that seem as dumb as a post, but they can just pick it up, no problem. So I guess we just have to recheck our perspective of just how good we think we are, and maybe come down a few pegs and just do what we have to do in order to get this thing under our belt. It's going to come eventually. And sooner or later, this will be behind you. You'll have the language under your belt and you'll be off and away. But whatever it is, you can't allow any obstacle to hold you back from this most important thing of learning the language. Just one other thing is that whilst we talk about Paraguay, we always have to be mindful that there are actually two languages spoken here, and they're spoken in conjunction with each other. It's the local dialect of Guarani and Spanish. So just when you thought it didn't get any more complicated. But the good news is most people speak Spanish. So if that's all you've got when you come here, well, you're going to be fine. If you can speak both languages, or at least just a few words in Guarani, it gets you a long way. And it's very well known that if you can just chalkle out a hello or a goodbye or just a greeting, whatever it is, it will be very well accepted, and you will find that things will go more smoothly for you sometimes. So that's just something to think about. Don't stress about it. It'll come sooner or later for all of us. We've just got to keep chipping away and try not to take it too seriously, because we know that we've already learnt one language. Well, some of us better than others, but if we learn one language, we can learn another. And let's have fun in the meantime. So I hope that's useful to someone out there, and until next time, take care. Ciao.